So this week we're going to be playing with an Anglo-Saxon Stirrup. This is something I've been messing around with for probably around a year now, and I'm just about getting to a point where they're starting to look like the originals. So we're starting with 12 inches of 30x5 and 10 inches of 10mm round, and the 30x5 is marked at 1 inch, 2 inch and 3 inches from each end. So the first mark, 1 inch from the end, we will do a double set down on the power hammer, and you'll notice that I'm not reducing the thickness, only the width of the material. As a matter of fact, I am rolling the piece to create a tube. Now this doesn't matter that it's not solid because it will get welded up later on. Now you can do this by hand. I've got a lot of time constraints on this video, so I'm doing as much of the work as I can under the power hammer. So repeat both ends. So the next stage is we'll actually take some 8mm round bar, and I will just roughly square it off under the power hammer. I'm not looking for perfectly square, just 4 flat faces. And this will become a collar which will weld around the round section that we've just put on the 30x5. So to make sure that it welds nicely, I'm just going to just taper both sides of the collar. That will help create a welding plane rather than a shear plane. So you can see I'm forming this to a trapezius shape. So next we're going to start rolling this into a circle, not the whole length, just as much material as we need. And we just need it to fit around the round stub that we put on the end of the 30x5. Like so. And just close that up, make sure it's nice and tight. At that stage we'll cut it off, and you can see that I'm cutting so that the outside of the cut is level with the outside edge of the collar. I did this one slightly in from the outer edge of the collar, just so that I had a bit of room to close it up. So at this stage we'll just get it hot, fit it into place and close it up. You don't have to hit it particularly hard, you just have to guide the metal shut. So that's all ready for welding. So just take a welding heat and You don't have to muller it, you just have to tap weld it basically. I'm using the Pritchell hole just to square up where the collar is. So the next stage is I'm using a swage I made, and at a welding heat I am just flattening the inside of the collar, and the swage is shaping the outside of it. Now I think what I might do in the future is actually upset the material rather than do a collar weld. That'll leave less marks on the inside. There are no weld marks on the original stirrups, so as far as I've been able to see, I've only actually been working from photographs rather than actual stirrups. But the lack of weld lines would indicate that it's been made from a larger piece of material rather than welded in place. So like I said, this is just really experiments to kind of figure out the best way to make these. So, and then what's left of the round bar that you forged, I'll just stick a scarf on that. So there we go, 2 collar welds swaged. They look a bit rough at the moment, but that will get sorted out later on. So the next thing is to upset the end of the pieces of 10 round, because we're going to scarf weld those onto what we've made so far out of the 30x5. Weld into place, being careful not to damage the collar. Now I think in hindsight I should have done that scarf weld first, then the collar weld, and it would have made my life a lot easier, mainly for holding on to it. I suppose I could have, instead of scarf welding it, I could have just forged out the whole end of 30x5, but I think that would have actually taken longer with getting it down to size and everything, so I think it was actually easier to scarf weld an extension onto it. So I don't have any copyright for any pictures of the original ones, but if you just go onto Google and stick in Viking stirrup or Anglo-Saxon stirrup, and they'll all pop up, and there's dozens of different types. So just after welding, forging to section and dressing it a bit. So then what we'll do is we'll just dress the set down leading up to the collar weld, flatten that out a bit, and just dress that material for a nicer transition. Now you can see it's thinned a little bit because of the welding. That's not the end of the weld, it is a bit annoying, but it's going to be folded over and welded up afterwards anyway, so yeah, that's where we're up to so far. So next I'm going to shape the round bar. Again, I'm using a swage. This is a second swage, and I want to form it to triangular section. You can do this by hand. I was going to film a clip of how to do it by hand, actually forgot. Plus this took a lot longer than I thought it would, so I didn't actually have the time as well. So I'm doing this under the power hammer with the swage that I made specifically for this over a year ago now. It's just easing it into the swage and then dressing up the edges afterwards to make sure it's an even thickness, or width rather. So then I'm going to go back to the first swage, and I'm just going to use that to define the transition between the triangular section and the collar weld. So again, that's a power hammer swage, not a hardy swage. So you can see how I'm coming in at an angle there, and that's basically how you forge round bar into triangular section. So that's that. It looks a little bit rough. That's not the end of the world. So next we're going to hot rasp the collar weld. There's a bit of flashing on there from it being swaged. So hot rasping just allows you to remove more material quickly, and it actually looks neater than cold rasping because it blends in better. So next up we're going to go down to the second mark, the 2-inch mark. We're going to cool off either side of it and fold. So I'm going to fold that completely 180 degrees. And that will be welded up. So I'm just going to make sure it's bang on the mark. So I'm pushing it back a little bit here. That's going to create that little step that you see on a lot of Dark Ages and early medieval stirrups. So weld her up. Now I could have done with slightly thicker material at this stage, so I wish I had upset it a bit in that area. Because it welded absolutely fine, it just didn't blend in as much as I like it to blend in. I like my welds to be a complete mystery for the layman. So at that stage, use the third mark, the 3-inch mark, to bend that little step back 90 degrees. And you'll see that the triangular section, because of inertia, stays where it is. So you'll have to bend that out separately and then make sure they're both at the same level. And using the second swage, I will just straighten up that triangular section. I think this is my most experimental video to date, so there's a lot of things I'll do differently on this. A lot of things I will do differently, because I was far from satisfied with the result. Most didn't make a video in disgust. There you go, that's up to that stage. So next I will make a mark at 6 inches and a mark at 10 inches on both sides. The mark at 10 inches I will bend outwards Being careful not to muller the triangular section. And the mark at 6 inches I will bend inwards, and hopefully the two 90-degree bends will meet somewhere in the middle. Like so. And make sure both sides are level and even. And line the tabs up with each other. And the next stage will be to just literally tack weld them together and maybe start rounding them off a bit. It doesn't need to be a massive weld, it just needs to hold them together because we're going to be sticking a collar weld on there. So next I took some 10mm round and onto the power hammer I roughly squared it off again and then formed it into a trapezius like the previous collar weld. So at that stage form it into a circle like we did previously. And fit it onto the stirrup. Now for this collar weld I could have done with possibly a spring swage or possibly forming it to half round rather than a trapezius shape. Not quite sure where I stand on Viking and Anglo-Saxon top and bottom swages. Because I've never actually seen any, but that doesn't mean to say that they didn't exist. Certainly the collars on the stirrups that I've come across seem to be swaged, but then they could have been filed and rasped afterwards. It's quite hard to tell. So if any of you have any information on Dark Ages swages, do let me know because I'll be quite interested in seeing it. So close up the collar. Now, I actually didn't record the footage of welding this collar into place, but it's similar to the previous one. So we're skipping straight through to the strap eye at the top. So I did that out of some 15x5, 20x5 I think it was. I'm literally rolling that into a roughly oval shape. And it's going to want to cant sideways to keep dressing out that cant. And you want to basically form an oval. And now be careful not to thin the metal, you want to move it rather than forge it. You can see I'm being quite gentle with it. and you just want the end strip to be in line with the parent bar. So at that stage I'll stick a drift in just to control it, and I will start forming it so that the gap is roughly rectangular. Make sure everything's flat. And at that stage I will cut it off the parent bar so that it has a tab either side, and I will form a scarf on the end of each of those tabs. So next I will go back to the stirrup itself and I will just flatten the end of that. And basically it will be sandwiched between the tabs on the strap eye. So mark off the length I need and cut off the excess. And that'll fit on like so. So there we go, all ready to weld. This was a bit of a nerve-wracking weld. I literally had about half an hour left before the yard shut. So I was rushing it a bit. I do wish I'd done this over a couple of days, but I can't really spend more than a day filming these videos. So, just squaring everything up. Stick that drift through, just to keep the eye open. Whilst you square off everything. And gave it a clean up with a wire brush like I normally do. Had to rush the end of it, but here's the finished product. So it's the right shape, the right proportions. The skills used are mostly correct, I think. Like I say, I believe those bottom collar welds were probably made from larger stock rather than collar welded. Purely because of the marks left on the back of them. I wish that I had worked on the foot plate and made that a bit more elegant rather than just leaving it as the parent bar. Again, I didn't have time to do that. The welds haven't blended in particularly well at the bottom. You guys know what I'm like with welding. I like them to disappear completely. In this case they haven't. The eye, which I rushed, is ugly as sin. As is that collar weld, which I will try and work on for the next prototype that I make. So mixed results on this one. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. If you fancy supporting these videos on Patreon, feel free to do so. Every penny I get is welcome. Here's this week's Patreon donors. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.